Okay, so this is the complete works of William Shakespeare over here. This is the web page that I want to scrape in order to get the vocabulary of all the characters to see which of Shakespeare's characters had the largest vocabulary. So if we look at the page, the front page navigates to each of the individual plays. So if we go inside each one, let's say Romeo and Juliet, you can see that it gives you a breakdown where you can look at each act and scene and the prologues. But I don't want to have to go into all of those, so luckily enough they give you a link to the entire play on one page. And this URL is the URL that I want to scrape because it's going to give me everything. But first of all, I need to make sure that I don't just get the URL for one of the plays, I want to look in all of them. So this is my scraper in ScraperWiki. The first thing are the libraries, and that's just to use some of the functions that are in them. I'm going to go through each of them as I use them. It's not very important in that I don't know anything about them, but they're all in the documentation and the tutorials for ScraperWiki, so I've just sort of copied and pasted those in. So what I've done, the first thing I've done, which is of importance, is define Shakespeare play URL. So that is going to allow me to scrape more than one URL, i.e. more than one play. So I've made sure that all my code is put inside this definition, and with Python that is just by making sure that everything is on a tab in from my defined function, and outside of it I've gone in and I've put each of the URLs for the full Shakespeare play. So you see here Tempest, Romeo and Juliet, etc. So that's the first thing I've done. Now to scrape it is this line here with scraperwiki.scrape. That again is something I've just copied and pasted from the tutorial, and the tutorial for scraping HTML, because the page is in HTML. And then there's this thing as well, which a tutorial told me to do, which is a parsing library. So basically what I think this does is if we go and look at the play, this is what we see, this is what your browser sees, but this is not how the actual web page is made. This is not the code for it. So for that, I'm going to open up Firebug, and it's going to allow me to see inside the makeup of the page, and we can see here that it is HTML. That's why I'm scraping HTML. We go into it and we can see there's a header that's an act, there's a header that's a prologue, and there's the scene and stuff like that, which is not anything that a character is saying, so I really want to ignore that. And the first time we get to a character is this thing, which is an A attribute. All this stuff here, that's a H, and that's a P attribute. This is giving it an A attribute, and this is giving a attribute with the name speech, and that gives a name. And inside here, and the name is in bold. And then inside this speech, there's another attribute which says name, but doesn't say speech. It gives the act, the scene, and the line. And then it gives, not in bold, what the character has said. So these two things are the things that I need to go and get from this page. I need to go scrape. So what Beautiful Soup does is it allows me to find these by the structures, by finding these attributes, A and B. And then that's going to help me distinguish between what is a character and what on earth they've said. So going back in, I've gone and have had to do a for loop in order to find all of these things to keep on going in. And this A and B is just any variable. I could have called it anything I want. So this is soup find all A. Again, this is something that I got from a tutorial, so I'm not exactly sure how it works, but the find all function is what Beautiful Soup allows. So this, when I say this A is what's important, because this is saying find all of these A's here, right? And then I'm setting B to be the string of A. So I'm setting B to be a string, and a string is just making sure that it is a series of letters, which Samson and what he said is. So going back, I need to distinguish between what is a character and what they're saying. It's first and foremost. So I need an if statement, and this is saying if B9 is S. So this is because I've been able to see what is made up in this website, in this HTML site, and this is 0th, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th. The 9th character of this is S. So that is basically distinguished between what is a character and what they're saying, just because name is speech whenever there's a character put in. And that's thanks to whoever made the website. So this is saying B equals S, character equals the string that's between the B's. So basically what this is doing is it's going through the loop and it's finding this. And then it's saying character equals the string that's in between the B's. So it's putting my characters in. And beforehand I've had to give the character as nothing, because when I tried to run it, it said that it hadn't been defined. So apparently I have to define it, and I just give it empty. And ignoring this little if loop for the moment, we need to go into else if statement. So that is finding the characters, but if it's not a character's name, it's something they've said. So this is the else if. And by putting else if character is not empty means, cleverly enough, that if we go in here, it means that the program has had to look through all of these, the act, the prologue, the scene, all this nonsense, which is something that a character is not saying, and has had to come to the first speech and put in a character before it's allowed to go into the else if statement, i.e. before it's going to look at any other A. So basically it's saying that if character is nothing, it means we haven't found a character yet, which means it's a prologue or something else, and it's discarding it. So it's saying if character is not empty, means we found the character. And now this is using something called vocab char, which is this thing that I've had to define. And because I've defined it with curly brackets, it's something called a dict. And a dict is basically a list that can point something to another thing, as far as I can tell. And that's why if we go in here, I've had to say in my first little statement where if I found a character and it's not in this list, I need to set this list, I need to put it in and put whatever the character has said as nothing. So this is basically saying put each character that you find in this list and point it to a string that says nothing. And then this here is saying that this here is saying that for the character that's in there, point it to whatever is in there at the moment, which for this first part is nothing, plus a string, which is looking at, if we go back in here, what's between the A's. So what's between the string between the A's is what they've said. And this is because a character doesn't, in Shakespeare, doesn't come on stage, say everything he needs to say, leaves, and then never comes back again. So this is making sure that if we've already found the character, we add whatever's in A string into something that he's previously said. But if we haven't found them yet, you need to put them in and give them an empty string that we can then later add on to. So that's quite complicated, and that's what that's doing.